When Abdullah himself was not watching the Prophet ﷺ, he says, my brother Al-Fadl told me so and so. And so he narrated everything that happened when he wasn't watching the Prophet ﷺ from Al-Fadl, from his brother. So, there's the hadith where Al-Fadl says that I was, Ibn Abbas says that I heard my brother say that I was with the Prophet ﷺ and he kept reciting the talbiyah until he stoned Jamratul Aqaba. Then he said takbir and so on and so forth. So he's sort of narrating the exact details from his brother, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Now, what happens when the Prophet ﷺ dies? Obviously, you can imagine that it's very traumatic for Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu, as it is with all of the companions. Okay? And Sa'id ibn Jubayr, he asks Ibn Abbas, he says, how old were you when the Prophet ﷺ died? So Ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, at that time I had been circumcised, I had already been circumcised. And they used to circumcise. They didn't used to circumcise the boys until they reached the age of puberty. So he said at that time I had been circumcised, so he had already been baligh, but 13 or 15 years old. That's what the narrations say. The most correct is that he was 13 years old because it's very clear. He says that he was born 3 years before the hijrah, so it's only 3 years that he gets to spend with the Prophet ﷺ. Actually, less than 3 years with the Prophet ﷺ. But Ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, his family, Al-Abbas himself, Al-Fadl, Usama ibn Zayd, Ali radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, the family of the Prophet ﷺ, they washed the body of the Prophet ﷺ. So Ibn Abbas was one of the people that actually got to wash the body of the Prophet ﷺ. And obviously that's very painful for him, the love that he has for Rasulullah ﷺ. And Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu says, and this is actually in Sahih Muslim, he says that I was one of the people that jumped in the grave of the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, I put like a red cloth there, I put something there, and I was one of the people that received the body of the Prophet ﷺ to put him into the grave. So subhanAllah, I mean, he was accompanying him all the way to the moment where he received the body of the Prophet ﷺ in his grave, and he was one of the people that buried the Prophet ﷺ. SubhanAllah, so symbolic that he was with him for all of these 3 years without any break. And so what's really impressive about him is obviously, he's still a young boy, right? And it's very, a young boy would be more traumatized than an older man, especially as much as the Prophet ﷺ showed him affection and showed him love, and the way he loves the Prophet ﷺ, in the sense that he's his family member, and also obviously because he's Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But Ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he doesn't stop, right? His goal is ilm. So the day that the Prophet ﷺ died, Ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, I had one of my friends from the Ansar. He said, I went to him and I said to him, let's go now and let's ask all of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, because they're all here now. All of the companions are back, because some of the Sahaba, a lot of them went out on futuhat, they went out on conquests and things of that sort. They were kind of spread out. But when the Prophet ﷺ died, they all came back. So Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu says, now we can ask all of our questions. Now we can go get everything. Now the friend of Ibn Abbas, who's also 13 years old, he tells him, look, they don't have time for you. And he said, why don't we play with the pigeons? Because back then they used to play with pigeons. Before the age of Xbox and PS3 or whatever it is, right? They used to play with pigeons. SubhanAllah, that's what young people used to do. Imam Malik rahimahullah got in trouble when he was a kid. His father was mad at him because he used to play with pigeons too much. Alright, so he said, why don't we just go play with the pigeons? Why are we gonna waste our time going and asking the Sahaba and so on and so forth? So Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu says, taraktuhu. So I just left him, right? I don't even need you anymore. And Ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he says that I would go to the doors of the Sahaba. فَأَضَعُ رِدَائِي وَأَنَامُ عَلَى بَابِي. And I would place my cloak, I'd take off my top garment, I'd spread it at their doorstep, and I'd go to sleep at their doorstep. He said, فَتُسْفِ الرِّيحُ التُّرَابَ عَلَيَّ. And he said the wind would be blowing dirt all over me. I'm sleeping in front of these doors and just dirt is coming all over me. And he said, so these companions, they'd open the door and they'd find Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu sleeping at the door. So they would start to dust him off and they would say, نَحْنُ نَأْتِيكَ يَا ابْنَ عَمِّ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. We would come to you, O cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. Just tell us, we'll come. You don't have to go through that. You don't have to subject yourself to this humiliation or sit and sleep in front of a door. And then Ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he says something that became a motto, for the students of knowledge. He responds and he says, الْعِلْمُ هُوَ الَّذِي يُؤْتَى, or الْعِلْمُ هُوَ الَّذِي يُؤْتَى إِلَيْهِ. Knowledge is sought. Knowledge is sought. Knowledge, لا يأتي. It doesn't come to you, you have to go to it. That, subhanAllah, that statement is in every single book that's been written in Islamic history on fadlul ilm wal ulama, on the virtues of knowledge and the people of knowledge. You always find that statement, and it became a motto for the people of knowledge, subhanAllah. Even in the early centuries, it became a memorized statement. Al-ilm huwa alladhi yu'ta. You have to go to knowledge. Knowledge will not come to you. And so Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, obviously, as he goes to all of these companions, subhanAllah, he honors them, even though, he is someone to be honored in and of himself. He's a great Sahabi, he's a great companion, he's from the family of the Prophet ﷺ, and he's a person of ilm. But look what he does. Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu, who's not that much older than him. He's about 8 years older than Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. So, I guess he is, he's a young man. The point is, he's not like a sheikh, right? He's not like this old man, right? Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu ta'ala anhu is 21 years old, 22 years old. But Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu sees him coming, and Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he grabs the reins of his horse or his camel and he starts to bring it down, serving him, right? And Zayd ibn Thabit says to him, La taf'al, don't do that. Ya ibn Ammi Rasulillah, O cousin of the Prophet ﷺ, you don't have to do that. And Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, listen to what he responds. He says, هَكَذَا أُمِرْنَا أَن نَفْعَلَ بِكُبَرَائِنَا وَعُلَمَائِنَا. This is how we were commanded to treat our elders and our scholars. He's saying to Zayd ibn Thabit, you are my scholar, you're my sheikh, I have to treat you this way. So Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu says, Irfa' ilayya yadik, give me your hand. So Zayd ibn Thabit, he takes his hand and he kisses his hand and he says, هَكَذَا أُمِرْنَا أَن نَفْعَلَ بِآلِ بَيْتِ نَبِيِّنَا. This is how we were commanded to treat the family of the Prophet ﷺ. So subhanAllah, there's this exchange of just humility between these very young men. But they understand, what the value of knowledge and the value of humility. And Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he used to reflect on that. He said, I was humble as a student, and that's why I was respected as a teacher. I was humble as a student, and so I was respected as a teacher. And what happened to that friend of his? Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu said, when I became famous, he used to walk by and he used to just kind of sit and he used to look at that gathering like, man. It's like two people going to college, one person was like serious about school and the other one was like, oh, don't worry about it. And then this guy is like a very successful doctor now, and which is like, half of our community, right? And then you've got this other guy that's, working at the hospital, but he's like barely making it, and he's just looking at the doctor and he's like, man, what did I do? What did I do with myself? So Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says that friend, he's just coming, he used to look at that gathering and he used to say, هَذَا الْفَتَى كَانَ أَعْقَلُ مِنِّي. He said, that young man knew better than me. He was smarter than I was that day when he said, let's go learn from the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll go ahead and we'll take a break now, inshallah. And we'll just take a break, we'll pray Salatul Isha, and then when we come back, we'll talk about now Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu settling into the role of a teacher and his companionship with the Sahaba that came afterwards. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لكم. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll go and we'll pray now. جزاكم الله خير.